Okay. All right, I'd like to have David Carmichael, our state archivist, do an intro.
Thank you, Cynthia, and welcome everybody to this installment of the Community History Dialogue. We've been very pleased with the response we've been getting, so please keep coming and give us your feedback. I don't know where you are, what it's like, but it's very snowy here in the Harrisburg area, but we didn't have to worry about the snow because we're doing this virtually, which is a great advantage. A lot of times when we talk to social communities about preserving their history, the community just feels overwhelmed because they believe they need to collect and preserve their history alone. And that's often appropriate, of course, but it can also be intimidating, not to mention expensive. Often, the best way for an underserved community to preserve its history is to partner with an established archives or museum and benefit from their existing resources and expertise. And sometimes we see this as a very close partnership where sometimes the social community will actually deposit their records in the archives or the museum and of that established repository. And sometimes it's a very loose partnership where the partners simply share expertise from time to time or selected resources. And both of those can be very, very good options. Today's speakers are going to share how the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium has collaborated with Senator John Heinz History Center to preserve and share the stories of Western Pennsylvanians with disabilities. And so I'm going to refer to them as the consortium, which you will understand, but you will understand I'm talking about the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. You'll also understand why I'm calling them the consortium rather than repeating that 10 times. So our speakers today, Tina Calabro is a founding member of the consortium and supports its communications, media, and outreach efforts. Her work as a disability issues writer for more than 2 decades has been recognized for expanding public understanding and highlighting people and organizations that create opportunity and positive change. She is the parent of an adult son who has a disability. Sierra Greene is an archivist at the Heinz History Center, where she regularly facilitates public programs, organizes student engagement opportunities, and assists researchers as they navigate the History Center's archival collections. Sierra has been a steering committee member with the consortium since 2016. Ann Mataraz is director of the Curatorial Division, chief historian, and director of the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum at the Heinz History Center. 3 different jobs at the Heinz History Center. She has managed the curatorial and collection staff for more than 15 years. She has served as a member of the executive and steering committees for the museum since their founding. Emily Ruby has been a curator at the Heinz History Center for over 10 years. Her main role is as a liaison between the museum and members of the community who would like to donate to the collection. She has also helped curate a variety of exhibitions, such as Heinz and Destination Moon. Emily has been a steering committee member of the consortium since 2016. So without further ado, let's benefit now from the experience of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting us to present about the consortium. I'm going to share my screen with my PowerPoint slides. I think I have to be permitted to do that.
You should be able to now.
Okay, great. Here we go. Okay. The consortium was founded in 2015, and this is our mission: to preserve and honor the historic struggle of Western Pennsylvanians with disabilities, to attain human and civil rights, and to share the lived experiences of today in order to promote community access, participation, and equal opportunity. So in this mission, you can see both the preservation side of our mission and the action side of our mission as well. Oops. Okay, our founding members are individuals with disabilities of various types, disability organizations of various types, advocates, activists, archivists, curators, educators, and subject experts. I wanted to tell you that we were brought together as a founding group originally by Dana Olson, who has a statewide group on disability history. And he had gotten a grant, and he included Western Pennsylvania in the grant. And because of that initial seed money, we were able to assemble the people in our area in Western Pennsylvania that are interested in disability history. And we already knew, those of us that came together, we already knew who was interested in it. There were a few projects that had come up. There had been some relationships that had started. One of them was with Heinz History Center. One of them was with the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, which was doing a lot of work on disability history. And we also knew there was besides a statewide interest, a national interest, and we had relationships with people that were interested in that milieu as well. So we kind of knew each other loosely, and so it wasn't really that hard to bring the consortium together. There was a significant piece of Western Pennsylvania history that you're going to hear me refer to a few times. It's called Polk Center, which is one of the original institutions in Pennsylvania. It was established in 1897. It is still open. And there's a lot of interest in Polk Center across the state and even nationally. And there has been a lot of work across the state on preserving institutional history. So that was a very important development. And then here in Western Pennsylvania, the Heinz History Center had been very involved in a collection that told the story of some advocacy around deinstitutionalization at Polk Center. And so that development was very important. Okay, so why we founded the organization? Well, number one, our awareness was that the struggle for disability rights had only recently been recognized as a part of American history, and that people with disabilities are underrepresented in the historic narrative. We knew that in many locations, including our own, that important developments and personal stories had not been sufficiently documented, preserved, or shared. We also knew that Western Pennsylvania is home to a significant amount of disability history, and people who had been there when that history was being made are getting older, and some are passing away. So we wanted to make sure we got ahead of that. We felt that a community-based organization with the networks that we had within the disability community in Western Pennsylvania could take a leadership role in outreach, facilitating relationships, education, communications, and fundraising. And getting back to the action part, that the history of disability rights guides the future of disability rights. And it's important to share this history with people with disabilities, families, the public, and decision makers. So these were our guiding principles. Okay, so then we formed a steering committee, and the first two on the list here are very important: individuals with disabilities of all types, and individuals with an interest in disability history. That would be my interest. I have an adult son who has a disability, but I've been working as a disability issues writer for a couple of decades. So those two on the list are important part of our consortium. And then we have a lot of organizational members, the Heinz History Center, the Institute on Disabilities at Temple, Achieva is a disability group, CLASS, and then gets into some disability specific groups, or like the Peel Center is a statewide group concerned with special education. The Pennsylvania History Coalition, that's Dana Olson's group. Polk State Center is a part of our consortium. It's on our steering committee. And then independent living. And the steering committee is always open to new members and new organizations. So that's who constitutes it right now. But then we have key partners, and this is our closest collaboration. So Senator John Heinz History Center, the Institute on Disabilities at Temple, and Achieva. Achieva is a large disability organization here in Western PA, and very important member of our consortium. And then they also serve as our fiscal sponsor. So we are a project, and Achieva is our fiscal sponsor. Okay, and I wanted to mention that our current project director, Mary Hartley, is here on this call, and also John Tegg, who was our first project director, and also members of our executive committee are here as well. Okay, so key partners. With our key partners, obviously the first two are very involved with disability history, and how we work with our key partners is that we raise our own funds for what we do as a consortium, and our key partners are our key collaborators, and they provide advice, they provide partnership on so many activities and all of that. Okay, so then here's our funders. I talked about the PA Developmental Disabilities Council that provided the seed money, and then we have two other funders that have been very helpful to us to get our work started and continue. And then we have some individual donors. Okay, so what are our activities? We serve as a resource of Western Pennsylvania disability history. We maintain a website as a clearinghouse for Western PA disability-related collections. This is a really important part of what we do. We spend a lot of time on being that clearinghouse that the public can go to find information. I'd like to show you that. Okay, so doing the website was one of the first things we did. I'm just going to scroll through our homepage really quickly, and then I'm going to show you a part of this that is an important part of the clearinghouse aspect. So let me see if I can just do some scrolling. This is an effort I'm going to talk about, this Voices of Change. I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is the disability history collections. This is part of the clearinghouse aspect. And then we have some of our mission. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting through this. And then more information about things that are available. Okay, so I want to show you here's the clearinghouse aspect. We do have a timeline. We have a section on Western Pennsylvania disability history collections. These are collections that are available in various forms for people to explore. They cannot explore them on our website. Our website takes them to those collections. We have resources for Pennsylvania disability history, and again, that takes people off of our site to different resources. We have national disability history resources. So I'm going to show you the Western PA section. And so what we do here is, sorry, it's hard to do this when you're talking and doing it, but in the screen, just a second, I'm trying to keep this full screen, but then it's impeding me from moving the cursor around. Okay, here we go. So we have Western Pennsylvania collections, and then this is not a website that has a lot of infrastructure that allows people to do keyword searches. They can do some kind of basic searching, but what we have tried to do is to give people some breakdown of what is available. So as you can see there, we have about 25 collections that are listed. I'm going to show you how we present each one. So we have a template, and Heinz History Center helped us develop this template. And so it's just the basic information people would need, and then they can leave our site, come back to it later. So I'm going to go back a bit. Yeah, so let me go back up here to, so like when we're talking about Pennsylvania resources, these are, oops, sorry about that. Kind of lost you there. Let's see. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So our resources, these all take people off of our site to these Pennsylvania resources. And then the national resources are like this as well. Okay, so I'm gonna close this now, go back to my presentation. Okay, so again, what we do is, as, you know, a continuation of our activities. We do a lot of education of the public about the evolution and significance of existing laws and policies. And again, it's the action part of our mission. Okay, so collaboration. We're part of statewide and national networks of disability history organizations. We connect Western Pennsylvania to the larger narrative. We help bring about, you know, with others, of the increased understandings of the wrongs of the past, the progress, and the importance of current humane laws and policies. And then we have a special focus on documenting institutionalization from the residents' and families' viewpoints. And, you know, the concept of institutionalization, because it speaks to the segregation and the putting aside of people with disabilities, is why it is such an important focus of disability history, because the movement of disability history has been toward integration of people with disabilities into the mainstream of life. Wanted to mention here too that with some of the collaboration mentioned statewide and national, the national effort toward a disability history museum, and I know there's a couple people on the call today that are involved with the national effort. The Pennhurst Memorial is another big organization that is working on the preservation and sharing of institutional history. Pennhurst was an institution. Collaboration with Temple University Institute on Disabilities. I've mentioned these people before, but in Pennsylvania, we still have 4 institutions open, not as old as Polk is, but we do have 4, and there still is active legislation regarding the closure of those institutions. So it's a very living issue. Okay, so we do outreach. And so what we do is we work with our partners to identify what historic materials and stories are out there, not collected or preserved yet. So we're trying to always find out, you know. We distribute an online survey. We've distributed it to about 600 entities in Western Pennsylvania. We've had a pretty good response. We have about 100 responses to our survey, and Emily Ruby is going to talk a bit more about that survey in a little bit. She and others at the Heinz History Center helped us to create that survey. Sharing community knowledge and contacts, and encouraging organizations to preserve their historic materials. Our outreach is 26 counties in Western PA. We're cross-disability, notable organizations and leadership, advocacy efforts, individuals with a story to tell. So here's an example of some survey follow-up. This is an organization called CLASS, which provides direct service to people with disabilities. They did talk about wanting to have some guidance on preservation of their history. And so there was a visit, and this is their staff person, Shannon, and this is Bridget Malley, who was our preservation scholar. And Sierra and Emily are here going through the records and talking with Shannon about guidance. So the consortium has public communications. We talked about the website. We have a newsletter that comes out. Right now it comes out monthly, and we have a Facebook page. I told you I'd talk about this Voices of Change. Voices of Change is a multimedia history effort which tells a wide variety of stories. Right now we've done about 10, and we disseminate these on our website and through our social media. With Polk, we've done quite a few of these Voices of Change multimedia histories about Polk Center. We have had former residents, we've had sisters, family members of former residents, a former employee, former advocates with the ARC of PA that help people transition out of Polk. And we also have done interviews with the most recent executive director and the person at Polk who maintains their memorabilia room. And then some of our other topics, cross-disability has been inclusive education in the Pittsburgh Public School. We've had some advocates, we've recorded them. We've done a really important organization here called the Children's Institute that serves people with disabilities. We've it used to be called the Home for Crippled Children, and we interviewed 3 residents back in the 50s and 60s. We've done the history of the L'Arche movement, which has a chapter in Erie. And we've also done an important story about an individual with a disability whose life story and legacy has led to many organizations in Western Pennsylvania to be funded. And it's the individual is Joe Benedum Trees. So the first one we did was Paul Dick, who is an accessible transportation advocate. And I was going to show a minute of this video, but I see that time is of the essence. So I am going to not do that, but you can visit the website and watch that. So we do events, often in collaboration with the Heinz History Center. And this is one we did on voting. We did one just this month on mental health. And as I was saying, that very urgent and important for us is Polk Center in Venango County, slated for closure in 2 years. And it's one of the most intact institutions of its kind in the nation. You can tell from that picture that it's old, and it's all intact, and ensuring the preservation of its artifacts and stories is a priority. So I'm going to stop sharing there. Thank you very much. And I want to introduce Ann Mataraz, who's going to go next.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate it. That was great. I want to step back now that Tina's given us kind of a deep dive into the consortium and its history and what we do, and just talk to everybody. All of us, or many of us in this meeting today, belong to organizations that are collecting organizations. And we do collecting in a variety of ways when we're doing community engagement work. So I just want to talk about some of the models that we've used at the History Center, including the model that we've used with the consortium, and how they operate and what their kind of benefits are. First of all, understanding, of course, that we collect in 2 different ways. We collect in proactive ways, whereas an institution, we go out actively into the community, searching for particular stories that we want to tell. We also collect in reactive ways. That's where people come to us unexpectedly and bring some of those stories. And before our association with the consortium, most of the collecting we were doing was somewhat reactive. These were stories that came to us by happenstance, or people called, wanted to preserve their history, but it wasn't a formalized or strategic kind of collecting. Now with other community groups, we've used a variety of strategies, as I said, to collect in different ways. One of them is the advisory committee method. So this is often where an institution or an organization recognizes that they have a particular project or program or exhibit that they want to collect for, and they build an advisory committee to assist in that work. Now this can happen that the community comes to you and wants to be involved and starts these efforts, and we have had that model of advisory committee working with us at the History Center, or it can be that the organization itself reaches out to the community to do that work. And we've done this a lot at the History Center, especially around collecting of stories related to ethnic history. We have 3 staff positions currently that are funded at the History Center: an Italian American program, an African American program, and our Round Jewish Archives, all that have staff people that are dedicated to working with community groups and to gathering collections. And they do this with the assistance of their advisory council. We've also done this very strategically for specific exhibits. And this is where we build an now those advisory councils that I just talked about related to the ethnic initiatives, some of them have more than a 30-year history of association with the History Center. So those relationships have evolved. We identify significant people in the community, they identify others in the community, and so on and so on. So it really extends our reach into a community. But we also do this for exhibits. Our Vietnam exhibits that we've done, for instance, Soul Soldiers, and the recent one we did in partnership with New York Historical Society, that had a group, an ad hoc advisory council, particularly of veterans, that we put together. We wanted to reach out to the veterans community from the Vietnam era. We wanted to be able to bring in their oral histories, their objects, their photographs, and archives. And we knew that having them involved would give us credibility in the larger community. It would give us connection, it would give us reach. So we did this by identifying significant organizations or individuals in the community, inviting them to join us and asking them, who else should we be working with? Who else should we reach out to? And we've used this model successfully for exhibitions, to proactively collect for exhibitions such as Vietnam, but also with the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum. I used to joke when I started that 20,000 square foot museum project that we had enough objects in the beginning to fill about 1,000 square feet, if that. But we did eventually, with the use of a large and very active advisory committee, reach out to the community and very successfully collect materials that tell the history of sports in Western Pennsylvania. The great thing about these advisory council model is those people often become your ambassadors in the community, and they become advocates for your institution. And sometimes, especially with our long-standing committees, those become people who do more than just bring collections to your door. The Italian American Advisory Council members have organized a fundraiser that has now raised more than $1 million to sustain and endow that program. So these people can become very valuable ambassadors, fundraisers, marketers, program planners, and collectors for your institution. The second model that we've used since we opened the History Center in 1996 is more of a host model. This is kind of a transactional model. We're an institution. When we opened, we realized we had a couple of important resources. We had space, we had extra space then, not so much now, and we had an expertise or staff. And so when we opened with a community gallery on the 4th floor of our building, our original building. And the community gallery was really seen as a way to invite groups from the community to use our space to tell their story. So it became, in essence, a transactional relationship. There was a contracted relationship. People applied to use the space, and we provided the space to them free of charge in the beginning. Sometimes there's a small fee for maintenance. And from us, they got the space, our resources, some guidance in how to do the program or the exhibit. And from them, we got often a new audience, a new connection to the community, a new way to bring people into our building that was just opening and to involve them in maybe becoming members. These relationships have come to open the door to collections as well. So when we worked with the Carpatho-Rusyn community for an exhibition on their faith, it opened the door to collections related to that ethnic group, related to that immigrant story, and related to that religious practice as well, that have been very beneficial to the institution. What we did find is one of the most important things to remember is we are a mission-driven institution, and that gallery became a place where companies wanted to celebrate their 25th anniversary. Or corporations saw it as a marketing opportunity to use the space. So we had to become more careful in the selections that we made, the relationships that we built, and the stories that we told to ensure that our audience wasn't coming for an advertisement or a commercial. They were coming for Western Pennsylvania history, that the work that we did there was mission driven. The final model is the model that Tina kind of outlined, this community driven relationship where the Disability Consortium actually came to us and asked us to join their efforts. We weren't the driver behind this. This wasn't a strategic initiative in terms of collecting. It was something, as I said earlier, that had been largely done as a reactive collecting effort by the History Center. Someone came to us, they had those collections, they met our mission. Then we said yes to that, and it was a worthy enterprise. But now we were joining someone else's effort to actually set out and preserve and tell a story. Sometimes an effort like this can challenge you. It wasn't something you prepared for. It wasn't something you necessarily had the expertise in. You know, when I did the glass exhibit, I became an expert in Western Pennsylvania glass, as all of you who work in museums or archives become experts in subject areas. You come to know the landscape, you come to know the players, you know how to go about doing the collecting, and it's natural and strategic for you. We had to learn. We had to sit at the table and to hear about these stories, but we felt it was important enough, a story, that we needed to be involved in the effort. And I have to say, as Tina indicated, the benefits to us have gone far beyond just the collections that we've begun to build at the History Center. They've opened our eyes to perceiving and telling stories through the lens of people with disability. They've informed how we use our building and how we understand our building and how our visitors are coming to our building. And they're teaching us important lessons about accessibility and inclusion. So beyond the collection, they've brought an audience to us that is bringing us new insights and new expertise in how we can preserve and tell history, and how we can welcome and ensure that all our visitors can engage in a meaningful way with our exhibits, with our programs, and with our collections. I'm going to invite now Sierra Greene to tell you a little bit more about how we've gone about doing this work and the kinds of collections that have come to us as a result of this important partnership. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. I really appreciate it. I want to open by just saying briefly that this collaborative work with the consortium through my role as an archivist at the Heinz History Center has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my professional career thus far. It's truly been, as Anne mentioned, an honor to learn so much more about the histories of people with disabilities in Western Pennsylvania, to become more familiar with the stories that hold resonance within this community, and to be directly involved in preserving those stories. As a result, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on the nature of this partnership, and I want to share with you some of the reflections on why I think this model, this collaboration, has been so successful during the first 5 years of the consortium's existence. So my first point is really to echo one of Tina's opening characteristics of the consortium. The fact that the consortium was consciously created and led by people within the disability and disability advocacy community is really the root of its success. And Tina mentioned, and we really, I think, need to give she and her colleagues, the early founders of the consortium, including Dana Olson, Mary Hartley, and John Tegg, so much credit for being intentional about identifying history-minded people within the community to gather together and really give shape to the mission of this organization. Again, too, I want to echo one of Tina's points that there was also an incredible amount of intentionality in ensuring that this group had cross-disability representation, that members of the community brought their own voice, their own experience, their own expertise to the table to ensure that that would help shape the stories that, that again, hold significance and resonance and meaning to this community in Western Pennsylvania. And again, I want to echo Anne from the outset. We at the History Center, we didn't start the conversation, and we sought not to dominate it. So when we look at the makeup of the consortium and thinking about the gatherings that we did have around physical tables that are now virtual, I think there have been just so many sustained instances of where everyone around the table is playing to their strengths. And so the community members have so much collective wisdom, collective knowledge, collective expertise based on their own lived experiences. And we at the History Center, we're in this remarkable position where we could listen to and learn from these stories. And then as an organization and museum workers, we were able to bring in our expertise as it relates to what it looks like to physically preserve the pieces of evidence that form this history. And we could also leverage lessons that we've learned as a museum in different strategies to share stories of people from the past in a way that resonate and that connect to contemporary issues in the present day. So I think within this environment, this ecosystem of everyone playing to their strengths, there has been just such an amount of mutual respect that I think has created this remarkable fertile ground of collaboration from which priorities and projects have been forged that have really served the mission of the organization and have really served the key audience that the consortium and the History Center seeks to connect with. Which gets me to my next point. So I think it has been such an incredible strength that there is a significant overlap in the mission of the History Center and of the consortium. So both of us as organizations are dedicated to preserving and sharing the stories of Pittsburghers and Western Pennsylvanians more broadly. And as Anne mentioned, the work of the consortium helped us identify significant gaps within our holdings at the History Center and has also ensured that we can bring the wisdom of the consortium and the collective knowledge of the consortium to make our exhibits, to make our programs, to make our spaces more accessible and inclusive. And again, we've made a lot of progress on that front. There's still so much more progress that we still need to make. And that's something we can talk about more in the Q&A if that's of interest. But I want to move on to two last key characteristics that I think has been a part of the success of the consortium. I cannot underscore enough the role of the dedication and the leadership of the consortium, particularly again, the key founders and leaders, as well as all steering committee members, to the mission of the organization. All of them have lent their revered and well-earned status as advocates and community members to the work of this organization. It is astounding in my mind, looking at, reflecting on Tina's conversation or Tina's presentation, all that the consortium has accomplished. And that is so much due to the credit of the dedication of the leaders of the consortium, and also their knowledge of the different funding organizations that have a passion and interest in serving people with disabilities throughout the state and in our region, and connecting the work of the consortium to those interests of those funders in order to make the work of the consortium more sustainable. So again, it's just been such an honor to contribute to some of the initiatives and priorities that have been defined by this organization. I have one last key characteristic that I'd like to share with you all. And that is, as a consortium, all of us, including us as History Center staff, believe firmly in the principle that community members get to decide for themselves what preservation of their story looks like. I'm not going to dig into that at all because I know that Emily is going to explore this within her remarks. Before I pass the mic, I just want to say again how much of an honor it's been to collaborate with the consortium and to be engaged in this work, and to have some time to share a little bit of my reflections. So with that, I'll pass it to Emily.
Thank you, Sierra. So the advantage and disadvantage of going last is that so much wonderful ground has been covered. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of our work on the ground to bring collections into the History Center and to preserve them out in the community. So my role at the History Center is to meet with community members that want to donate things to our collection. And Anne touched on that. Some of that's reactive, some of that's proactive. People call us, they have something that they think we might be interested in, or we go out searching for things that we think fit into a certain exhibition or holes in our collection. So when we bring a collection in, or when we're considering a collection, we meet as a collections committee and we talk about, does this fill a hole in our collection? What's the provenance and story behind this? And can we care for this item long-term? What's the condition the item's in? We consider all these factors. And I kind of brought that same, those same kind of questions, that same role onto the consortium. And we kind of go through the same process where Sierra and I go out. I'm looking at the kind of 3D materials. Sierra is concentrating on the archives. And we bring those same questions and knowledge base to the consortium in their efforts to document this history. And I just want to reiterate what Sierra has said. We are just so grateful as staff members of the History Center to be a part of this organization. This is such important history, and it's history that we need to tell and needs to be preserved. And so to have representation, to be part of this consortium where, if we were to go out and document this history, it would take us years and years to establish these relationships, to try to figure out what are the important stories in our region. And when we became a part of this organization, we were immediately kind of put in contact with the people that knew this history. This is their history, and they told us what stories were important and what needed to be preserved and who to make contact with. And so those are that's such a valuable relationship and resource. And I think one of the really important parts of having these community organizations be partners with History Centers. So I think a lot of times the issue we have when we are dealing with the public in general, so when we work at the History Center, when we're bringing in collections, is that people automatically think about exhibits. And we often have to explain to people that so much of our collection, most of our collection is in storage and it's being preserved, and that exhibits are kind of the most staff intensive, most expensive part of what we do, but there's so many other ways that we share this history. And that's some of the key conversations we had early on with members of the consortium is, that the first thing we need to do is go out into the community and figure out what's out there. And that was the survey that Tina and Sierra have referred to. They worked really hard putting this survey together where they went out and canvassed the disability communities in our region and found out where these collections are, what are the collections, where are they located, are they currently okay and fine and being preserved. And if that was the case, then they could stay where they are. This was not about bringing things into the History Center. This was about making sure this history is being preserved and shared. And so you can go to the website and you can look at the survey and you can find out where these collections are, even if they don't exist within the History Center. And then the second thing was, okay, but what is in danger and what can't be preserved where it currently is? And then we worked to bring some of those collections into the History Center or into an organization that was more appropriate, but just making sure that these important stories are being preserved in some way. And I think that's an important part of this partnership. Like I said, it's just that it wasn't about us having it. It was just about helping to preserve these stories in whatever form that was. But we were able to, and we have been able to bring in really amazing collections to the History Center. And we've been able to share those in many ways, blogs, on our website, on the Consortium's website, through speaking engagement, through public programs. And we have a lot of links that we've shared in the chat that you can see the different ways that kind of the fruits of this collaboration so far. And of course, exhibits, that's still something that is important to us. That's part of what we do at the History Center. And we have been able to incorporate some really amazing stories into some of our core exhibitions, such as Dan McCoy and his sled hockey, achievements in sled hockey, which is part of now our hockey section in the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum, and an upcoming exhibition that we are going to be hosting in the spring on American democracy. It's a Smithsonian traveling exhibit. There's some really amazing advocacy stories that we are going to be sharing in that exhibition from our region. And I'm going to kind of stop there now and just let it open up for conversation, but we can certainly expand more on that if we have time. Thank you, everyone.